Welcome back to The Right Routine. I'm Master Joel, the Reluctant Writer's Accomplice, and today I'm here with Allison Hymas. Allison, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Allison Hymas. I am a middle grade author. I have written 4 books, Under Locker and Key and Arts and Thefts, which are a short series about a boy who's a thief for hire at his middle school. I've also written 2 more historically based puzzle books, The Explorer's Code and Secrets of Stone and Sea. I currently live in Springville, Utah with my husband and my 2 children. I've got a 3-year-old girl and a 1-year-old boy. I love reading. I love writing. I love good movies, and I also enjoy long distance running and baking, especially when I can alter or invent new recipes. I think that's fun.
Ooh, that sounds fun. We should hang out during we're cooking.
Halloween, yeah. Think of some fun things to bake then.
Okay, so I actually found you. I was looking for authors that I liked, that were popular, and I actually was talking to some librarians at my nearby library, and one of them said, "Oh, have you read these books? When your kids are older, these books are awesome. Here's the author's name. See if you can contact her, because these books are so cool." So that's how I found you.
Wow.
Through that recommendation.
Oh, yeah, a librarian's recommendation. That is top notch.
It's top notch.
I feel very honored.
Yeah. And I went on your website. Your books are so cool. The titles are so clever.
Thanks. I can claim the first 2. I can claim Under Locker and Key and Arts and Thefts as mine, but the other ones I had to fight with my editors a few times to find a title that we both liked.
Okay.
So,
can you tell me about that? How do you work with your editor? Do you have an agent? How did you find an agent, if you have one? How
I do. I have an agent. So I got my agent a way that many authors do not. I got mine through cold query. So just we never met in person. We never met at a conference, which is how most people find their agents. I sent out query letters and happened to get a bite. And when you send out a query letter and you get one agent that says, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you and maybe represent you," the next thing you do is you talk to them, tell them, "Thank you, can I have a few days to think about this?" And then you send out to every other agent you're talking to, every other agent you've sent your book to, and say, "Hey, somebody's interested. Who else wants to join the fight?" And that's how I found my agent, is somebody else wanted to join in and wanted to, who also was reading my book and was interested. So I talked with her and we hit it off. Her name's Lauren Abramo. She works in New York and she's great. Like, she is wonderful. I'm really pleased to have her as an agent. We've worked well together she's worked with me on all 4 of my books. And we're in talks for a new project, but that's in still early production, so I don't even know what it's going to be quite yet. So that's been good. Working with an editor, let's see. I think it's fine. I've been blessed with some really great editors. They have been people who trust me as the writer. They don't tell me what to do. They will suggest changes. They know what the business is. They know the way that people, like, they know how people will read the books. They know what the audiences are what the audiences are looking for, what are best suited for kids in the middle grade area. So what they'll do most of the time is they'll send me back the letter once they've read my book that say things like, "In this scene, your character seems a little unlikable. Or you go, like, is that what you want?" Mm-hmm. But they don't tell me how to fix it, and that has been really nice. Going back to the titles, I don't know if many people know this, but if you're traditionally published like I am, you don't have a say as a writer over your cover art or your title, ultimately. No. Not necessarily, not legally. Most of the time, they will give you a say. So I have consultation rights, on titles and art. So what they do is they will show me the art ahead of time, ask me if I like it, if it feels true to the book. With Secrets of Stone and Sea, they actually listed a couple of different artists and said, which one do you like best? And so that was even cooler. So it's not like I'm out of the loop, but ultimately that decision will be made by the editing house. Same with titles. They know what kind of titles sell, especially for the audience they're marketing toward. And so sometimes I'll produce a title and they're like, that's just not good enough. And most of the time I'm like, yeah, I know. But I had to call it something when I was saving the file on my computer. So that's what we went with. And then there comes the after that comes the back and forth of, well, here's a new title. Well, we don't like that one. What about this title? Well, I don't like that one. And that went on for a while. The Explorer's Code, I want to say that one went on for several months of back and forth, just trying to find a title before this book was finally published. So that was fun. But in the end, I like the new titles better. I'm glad we went through what we did. And I'm glad they kept Under Lock and Key and Arts and Thefts because I love puns and I would keep the puns for those silly books.
They're perfect.
Oh, thanks.
I like those. And the artwork on the covers is really good. I saw it on your website.
I don't choose the artist for the most part. I mean, I did for the one book, but they've been fantastic. I write middle grade, and middle grade art tends to be actual art, like hand-drawn or painted artwork, whereas YA, at least for a little while, was photography. Mm-hmm. So there are different styles for different genres and different age groups, and I didn't know that until I started working with artists for the covers of the book.
So how many people did you have to work with per book?
Per book? Let's see. I've got a writers, not counting my writers group and my beta readers. So those are important. It's really easy when you're writing all by yourself to miss blind spots. Or I had a teacher, Chris Crow, who would call them howlers. So they're things that you know better, like you use the wrong punctuation or the wrong grammar, or you use the same sentence 3 times in a row or something like that, that you know better, but you didn't catch it because you're too close to the book and you've been staring at the same page for 5 days and you just didn't see it. So we call those howlers. And so a writing group's a good way to get rid of those howlers. It's also a good way to get multiple points of view from diverse backgrounds on what you're writing. And even get reader feedback. My current writing group, we call ourselves the principal's office. We write middle grade, and it's been really fun because they're fantastic in reading my story, pointing out the places where it's not working, helping me brainstorm ways to make it work, or even talking about, well, your story's working, but I think it could be even more amazing. You can raise the stakes. You can dig deeper into this character. You can hurt your characters more. You can make the reward more of a bigger payout, things like that, just to make it a more dynamic book. So that's been useful. Sensitivity readers, beta readers, people who I need to read the book to make sure that I'm not missing any moments where I should be more sensitive to the characters or to diverse backgrounds, diverse readers, beta readers who, of whom my sister is one of my favorites. She is a fantastic reader and she tells me the truth. So that's great. Just making sure that the book is sound, it's solid, the plot is working, characters are interesting and likable when they need to be. So that's even before I send it off to my agent or my editor. So those are just workshoppers, people around me, people I trust. So I work with my agent. So after that, all those things, my agent will go through my book and check it out, read it, give me some notes. Nothing on the same level as my editor, but enough to help polish it up to get it off the ground. And then I work with an editor. My book is assigned an editor. Sometimes the authors, I think it might be the authors assigned to an editor. I've worked with 3 different editors. And then there was a shakeup during COVID where I had a couple others that just didn't last very long because COVID was such a fun time for all of us. And everything was getting moved around.
Mhm.
So I work with an editor pretty much one-on-one. They read the story, they send me notes, I fix the notes, I send it back, they send me more notes until we're all happy with where the book is. After that, I work with copy editors. So these are people who go through and they look for a lot of those howlers, those moments where you use the wrong grammar, the wrong punctuation, and you cannot believe you spelled your own main character's name that way for 3 solid pages, things like that. So the copy editors are fantastic because they're the ones that make me look smart, catching all those silly mistakes that I make as a writer. So, cannot laud them enough. Everybody in the process is so amazing. After the copy editors, at that point, the book is pretty much ready for preparation for publishing. So a good way to describe this, I guess, is I work with the editor for drafts of the book. I work with copy editors for copy editing the book. And then the copy editors also help me with formatting. We get these pages. So the last thing that I work on before I send the book off to be published in the state that it's in, they're called first pass pages. They're pages that have been formatted and printed, so you can see what the chapter headings are going to look like. You're going to see the way that the pages look on, like it's supposed to be the way it looks on the page. Mm. And so they check for things like stacking, like when you have the word was on 3 different lines and they all, because of the way it's formatted, they're right on top of each other. So it looks kind of silly on the page. So they'll stop things like that. They'll check line length. They'll check spacing in the new formatting. And you can still change things then, but it's a little bit harder to do because you have to keep the formatting just so. So if I have to change a sentence, I've got to keep it about the original length of the sentence that I'm changing, or it'll mess everything up. But I think I believe I'll work with the copy editors on that one. And then at that point, it's pretty much out of my hands. I'll work with the artist a little bit, but that's not very direct. It's through the editor mostly. Mm-hmm. So the editor will say, hey, this is the artist we have. This is their sketch. Do you like this? Do you think you should add anything? Does it represent your book well? And I'll say, yes, it does. Or, maybe this, I don't really think that this works really well. Maybe this tiny little element, maybe we can change that. And then they go back to the artist, and then I see the next draft, and I'm like, okay, that looks great. Whatever. That's usually who I work with. So yeah, editor or agent, editor, copy editors, and then indirectly through the artist. That's been my experience. That's
crazy. Here I was thinking you just had to find an agent, and then they would find you an editor.
Yeah, well, the agent finds you a publishing house. They'll find you an editor at a publishing house, but that always comes with a team.
Mm. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm also surprised that the cold query is less common. It seems like, or I thought that was the only way to get an agent, unless you happen to have a friend of a friend who was already an agent.
Oh. No, a lot of people will go to writing conferences. If you're an aspiring writer, I cannot recommend enough going to writing conferences. You learn a lot about the craft. You can learn a lot about topics related to your writing. They always have editors and agents there you can talk to. They even have pitch sessions where you can write up your pitch, take it to an agent or editor. Maybe you have about 2 minutes. You can just pitch them your book, and if they're interested, they'll tell you to send it to them. And those are great because you can send it to them with the email starting out with, hey, remember me? I met you at this conference. You told me to send you my book. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm doing. Here it is. And then they can say, oh, yes, I remember you. And you've got a personal connection. You kind of move to the top of the slush pile. I was too shy to do that at the writing conferences I went to. So I thought we'll try the cold query. And then if that doesn't work, then I guess I'll put on my big girl pants and try this. I'm going to try this. But so what ended up happening is I used a website called Query Tracker. And they've got a paid subscription. They also have a free service. I just used the free one So I had Query Tracker and I had an Excel spreadsheet. And what I would do is I would go on Query Tracker. They had a way to, so there's Query Tracker and there's Agent Query. Those are two different sites that I would use. I believe it's Query Tracker it's Query Tracker where you can put in search terms. So I'd put in like middle grade, comedy, adventure, or something like that. And it would bring up agents that have represented that before or are actively looking for something in those genres. And it'd bring up their credentials. It would bring up the website where you could check out their agency. So I would always check them out on the website. And then, after reading their bio, I'd be like, yeah, that's me. That's my book. Or I'd think, you know what? That's close, but not quite. I don't think they're a good fit. And I make my list of who I'd send it to. Most agents accept email queries. I did not paper query anybody. I just sent emails. So I would send out my query. I tailor it to be individual to each agent. So I make sure I'd say, Dear Ms. Abramo, which was my agent, instead of, just Dear Agent. I'd explain a little bit about how I found that agent and then launch into the query. And I would send out about 10 or 15 of those, wait a little while for the rejections to come back, and then send out 10 or 15 more. Every time I sent one out to a query out to an agent, I would mark them down in my Excel spreadsheet with the date that I send it out to them. And then if it came back as a rejection, I'd highlight that cell in red and then put the rejection date in another column. So I kept track of who said yes, who said no, who said maybe, people who I was still waiting on as I was waiting on those queries. So, that's what cold querying is like. It's a lot of waiting and a whole lot of rejections and a lot of revising the query letter so it sounds better the next time you send it out. Mm-hmm. And there's some really good sources online. There's a writer named Alana Johnson, and she's got a little pamphlet you can find online called something along the lines of writing a killer query letter. I could look it up. But that's my guide. That is the guide that I used. And that after I started following those guidelines or thinking about the query in that way, I got a lot more attention. So it does work. Revising the query does work.
Nice.
Yep.
That's a lot of work.
It is. Queries and synopses you have to take them just as seriously as the book. They're shorter, but they are tight. You have to make sure that you're really selling your book, your ideas, your characters, and even your voice in this short 250-word query letter. So it's not a lot of room, but it can be really powerful when you do it right. Yeah, it took me many drafts to find the queries that worked for me.
I bet. I've written some books. I'm working on them. I'm not published yet, but when I am, I'll be coming back and listening to this again and taking notes for exactly what to do.
All right.
How do you recover from the rejections?
They hurt a lot, especially at first, because your book is your baby and your book is you, right? It feels very personal to be rejected at first. After about 30 of them, it still hurts a lot. After about 100 of them, it still hurts. You do get used to them. The thing that really helped me in coming back is I attended a writers' conference, and you had some agents and editors there, and they were talking about rejections, and they said, honestly, if you're honing your craft, if you're taking it seriously, if you're listening to the instructions that the agents and editors give out for what they want submitted, because each one of them has their own rules. Some want a query letter only. Some want a partial of the book. That means that sometimes they want a synopsis. Sometimes they want 3 chapters. They want it formatted a certain way. As long as you're listening to that, odds are eventually you'll find somebody, as long as you keep trying and keep trying to perfect what you're doing. It's a numbers game. More than anything else, it's a numbers game. But I also heard these agents and editors talking about how some of the reasons they reject a query or a book is something like there could be they read it right before lunch and they were hangry, or they read it right before they were going home and they were tired and they just wanted to buzz through the last of these, or it's a really cool idea, it's a really cool story, but they just signed another author who had a similar book and they can't have two that are that similar coming from the same person or the same agency or the same publishing house, something like that. So a lot of the time it's not personal at all. It's not personal at all. It's business. It's just people being people. They have their own lives, their own schedules, and sometimes it's just you just got them at the wrong time, or on the wrong day, or with the wrong project. And that helped me a lot because it's good to know, like, this, you know, honestly, they're not rejecting me as a person. They're rejecting the story because it doesn't work for them right now. But that doesn't mean that it won't work for somebody else down the line. Another thing that helped are there are different types of rejection letters. There is such a thing as a good rejection letter. So one type of rejection is the silent rejection, that you don't get anything back. You sit there for months and months and nobody says a word back because they just read your query and deleted it. No response is a no. Those aren't fantastic. You don't get any help with anything on those, but you understand why agents do it. They read lots and lots of queries, and so it just takes a lot of time even to send a form letter back. Another type of rejection letter is the form letter, which is, dear author, thank you for sending this. It doesn't fit our needs right now. Best of luck. Those are fine. It feels nice to know that they actually cared enough to send a letter back, but they don't really give you very much. Now, the good rejection letters are the ones where they give you the reason why. And those hurt the worst because now you have to deal with faults in your query or your book when they see things like, oh, we were interested, we read your query and the plot seemed interesting, but the characters were bland. And you're like, oh, my soul, my heart. Or we liked your query, but we didn't really understand what was happening in it. We didn't understand what the plot was. Those are good because you can take that information, you can take it back to the query or the book and fix it and then try again. And this time you might get a bite. So those are also good. So rejections feel a little bit less painful, I would say, when you know that it's not personal, and B, if your book is close to good, that's another thing about the good rejection. They wouldn't give you that information if they didn't think it was worth fixing. So if you get your story is good, but query back that has some personalized feedback, that means that they see some value in it and you can just fix it and try again. And those ones, even though they're a little bit more personal feeling, they are good, and they do in the end help me feel a little bit better about the rejections. And then this is also something I did personally. Whenever I'd get 20 or 30 rejections, I would treat myself.
Oh.
I'd go to the library for a little while and really spend time there because that's my happy place and I like it. Or I'd get some ice cream, or I'd watch a movie with popcorn, or just something that would be like, just something that would take my mind off it, or just maybe feel a little bit better. It's a milestone. Rejections, getting so many rejections is an author milestone. Every author that you've ever read and loved, even the great ones, has been rejected a lot. Sometimes even after they have gotten their big name. So it's not personal, it's just business. Sometimes the book just does not work for the agent or the editor.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, that is a lot of information. And thanks for going into all of that. If you don't mind, I'd like to kind of switch gears. Can you tell me how you became a writer in the first place? Have you always wanted to be an author? Did it just happen?
Well, a little dose of both, but I always wanted to be an author. I always wanted to be a writer. I remember going to career day as an elementary school kid dressed in sweats with a pencil behind my ear because I wanted to be a writer, and that's what writers wore, according to the people I talked to.
Mhm.
Uh, they wore sweats and they had writing implements on their body, I guess, which is mostly true. Except now I do most of my writing on a laptop, so yeah, there's no pencil. When I was in elementary school, I would write books with kids. Like I'd co-author some books with some kids in my class. I'd write my own little stories. Yeah, my mother kept these stories and brought them out when I published my first book so she could show them off. But
Oh.
she had even older first. She had my first book. She had my old books. Um, when I was in sixth grade, I had a teacher, a sixth grade language arts. It was called language arts in school teacher who would read the stuff that I wrote, the poetry, the short stories, and she'd say, and then she told me that I had a talent there and that I should consider being a writer. And up to that point, it was fun. It was fun to do. I don't think I really took it that seriously. You had to dress up for as something for career day. Um, but at that point, I thought, I could study this. I could do this professionally. So that's what I started gunning for. I joined a creative writing club in high school and took as many English classes as I could because at my high school, senior year, you could choose whether or not you wanted to take math or science. And you could take an extra, at that time, you could take an extra history class or English class. So that's what I did. I took 2 English classes that year. And college, I came to BYU and I came to BYU here in Utah, and I studied English and then graduated from that. My honors thesis was a novel.
Oh.
And then I went to graduate school also at BYU to get a master's in creative writing. So as for whether or not I've always wanted to be a writer, yes, I did. I kind of fell into middle grade writing in a sideways way. So I always thought that I'd be a YA writer. I liked reading YA as a teenager, and that's what I knew. And I liked the fantasy and the romance, and it was fun. So that's mostly what I would write. And then I took a class, and we needed to write a picture book, a middle grade short story, and a YA short story. And the picture book unit came and went. Middle grade came up, and I had never really written middle grade before, so I didn't know what I was doing. So I went to the library. I did some research by reading a whole bunch of middle grade, and came up with this idea about this boy who was a thief for hire at his middle school. And I wrote this short story, and it was well received. My class really liked it. They liked the character. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll take the short story and turn it into a novel. And it became my back burner project. So whenever I was, working on my master's thesis or another story, and it just felt heavy, it felt too serious. I just couldn't handle that seriousness. I was stressed out. I'd pull out this silly middle grade story about this snarky little thief, and I would work on that. And it was fun. And so I had this project that was all completed and even edited to some degree. As I was coming close to my last semester term, whatever, at BYU for my master's program. And then I've mentioned him before. Chris Crow is kind of my mentor at BYU. He was teaching a class on writing, the young adult novel. Middle grade was included in that too. It was titled Writing the Young Adult Novel. And he asked me to come back and be in the class as a student. I'd already taken that class from him, and I told him, I'd love to. I love that class. It's a lot of fun, but I just defended my master's thesis. I don't really have a story. And he said, "Are you sure about that?" And I said, "Well, I do have this one middle grade thing that I've been working on." And he said, "Bring that." So I brought that, and we worked on it, and it was well received. Again, people seemed to like it, seemed to like the character. And they told me in this class, you know what, maybe you should consider querying this one out. Maybe you should send this one to publishers. And I've been sending YA and getting just buckets of rejections back, so that had been fun. And so I thought, you know what, maybe I will. And lo and behold, that was the one. This middle grade that I wouldn't have written if it wasn't for this class that pushed me out of my comfort zone. This middle grade that I didn't take seriously. I thought it was just a personal passion project, just for fun, something to get my mind off everything else, ended up being the one that people saw something in. And I have to say, I think there's something to loving what you write. People can sense that joy. Just having a good time with a story can really come through the pages. I'm working on a story right now that I'm having a really good time with. And my writing group has noticed it too. So it comes through.
That's wonderful. What is it like with a writing group? I've tried to join some on Facebook. I don't really know other writers, so I've never known what a writing group really was like. Can you tell me more about that?
I've been in a few writing groups, one to another. I was part of two for a while, but just didn't have the time to go to both meetings, so I ended up picking one over the other. Um, it's good. Different writing groups do things differently. I had one writing group where one person was up every couple of weeks, and they'd send an entire novel. So they would send the entire manuscript of the novel that they were working on. And we'd all read it, just the one book. I think we always had about 2 weeks. I think we meet 2 weeks or every month, something like that. I think it was maybe once a month to give each other enough time to write. So we'd send the entire novel we were working on. Everybody would read it. We'd all sit around a table. We'd meet physically and eat snacks. Some of them were cookies that I made up. I was once challenged to design a cookie based on Mace Windu's lightsaber.
Wow.
So it was a blackberry. It was like a lemon bar, but I used blackberry instead. Next time I'm going to do raspberry if I do that one again. And so we talked about it. We'd socialize a little bit. We talked about the book. And so one person would just sit there and take it. You just sit there quietly and just take all the feedback, positive, negative, positive and constructive. Because it's all positive, but sometimes you're getting told you're a wonderful writer, and sometimes you're being told how you can build it better. So it's constructive. So that was my last writing group. The one I'm in right now, we meet every 2 weeks. It's virtual. We meet over Zoom. And we send about 5,000 words max.
Okay.
So if you're keeping track at home for a middle grade group, which is what I'm in right now, with the principal's office. By the way, my fellow inmates at the principal's office, my writing group, are Mike Thayer and Benjamin Hewitt. They're also middle grade writers. What we do is all of us submit. We all send about 5,000 words. We read those ahead of time, and then we sit and we talk to each other. Each person takes a turn, and where they get their feedback. This group's a lot louder, a little bit more dynamic. The person who's being reviewed doesn't necessarily have to sit there and listen. We can answer questions or explain where we are coming from and kind of work through, okay, if I need the character in this scene to be more active, how can I do that better? Things like that. So it's different. It's a different vibe. Every writing group's different. If you're looking for a good writing group, you're going to want to look for a group that reads what you are writing.
Oh, okay.
It's hard to be in a group where the types of books that you're writing is not something that group really knows. If you're writing science fiction and everybody in your group writes historical fiction and reads historical fiction, they're going to have questions for science fiction that you're not going to find with the science fiction readership. Mm-hmm. And vice versa. You're going to have questions about historical fiction that are not going to be perhaps useful. So you're going to have to look for a group. And caveat on that, it's possible to be in a group where everybody writes different things. You just kind of have to be more open and flexible about different types of genres. I've been in groups where I've written fantasy, or people in my group have written fantasy, and it's kind of just understood that if you write fantasy, there are different rules than if you're writing a romance or historical fiction. So as long as everybody knows those rules, it can be okay. You want to be in a group where you jive well with the type of feedback that's given, the type of dynamic in the group. You want to find a group that that you can handle the workload for. So if it's a group that meets every week and you've got to write 5 chapters every week, for me right now, I couldn't do a group that has that much. The group that I'm in right now, that's all I can. That it's a workload that I can manage, and so that works out well. Yeah, it can be a really positive thing to be in a writing group. It can also not be fantastic depending on how the group works, the kind of feedback that you need. I've been in writing groups where I present my work and they say, oh, this is all great. This is all fantastic. And that doesn't really give me much to work with. I've been in writing groups where the work gets brought up and just absolutely gets smashed to pieces by the group. And you end up walking home thinking, I am the worst writer in the world. Why do I even bother? So neither of those are particularly useful. Yeah, I'd say with working with a writing group, it's all about the selection of the group, and it's all about being flexible with the group, trying to make the book the best that it can be.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I'd like to ask you about writer's block. Because you mentioned, when you're feeling like a horrible writer, it's hard to write. But there are other reasons why it's difficult to write too. How do you overcome that? Writer's block.
A few different ways. I'd say the first type of writer's block that I typically try to overcome is I know I need to write today, but I don't want to do it. I'm tired. I have too much to do. I would like to lie on the ground and do literally anything else. You hear these jokes, you see these memes about, a writer with a perfectly clean house must be on deadline. Like they're doing everything they can to avoid writing. There's this feeling that you need to have everything's perfect. So my mind is clear, my house is clear, everything's perfect, right? And that's not true. And if that were the case, nobody would ever write. So how I get around that is I set apart a time every week. It's Tuesdays and Thursdays after the kids go to bed. That's my writing time. I'll do nap times if I feel like I can, but that's not always the case. Mm-hmm. So when that time rolls around, I know it's writing time. I'll prepare before then to make sure everything's done that I need to get done. Not everything, but by that time, my to-do list should be stricken, should be done. My husband knows that that's writing time, and so he will help preserve that for me. I will, in the hours leading up to that writing time, I will jazz myself up for writing. I will think about my book. I will listen to music. I have a playlist for my latest project on Spotify. I will listen to music that makes me think of my book. I will talk about my book with other people and kind of explain, here's the next chapter. This is what I'm going to do. This is my question. Oh, what if I did this? To kind of jazz myself up so that when that time comes, I'm not thinking, now I have to write. It's more of okay, I'm going to write and I know where I'm going. Word counts work for me. So just pushing myself through it, especially since a word count goal of about 1,000 to 2,000 words isn't terribly hard to do once you get rolling. 500 words is fine, whatever you can do. But it's not a huge amount. It's not chapters on chapters. It's a couple of hours of good work once you get rolling. And for me, the problem is always just getting rolling. So telling myself I have to write 1,000 words tonight. Even if I don't make that, just telling myself I need to write this forces me to sit down and get moving. And then once the juices start flowing, it gets a little bit easier to keep that ball rolling. So that's how I avoid procrastination, writer's block. But like all writers, there are times I don't know what I'm going to do next. Mm-hmm. And those are times where I'm extra kind to myself. I don't try to push it. I don't try to beat the story out of me. I'll keep writing. I will do outlines that are just free thinking. I just type down anything that comes to my head. And those are hilarious to read because they're things like, well, what if we had this character climb the cliff and find this treasure up there? No, I hate that. Let's go back. Like it's written there, like just in the stream of consciousness. No, I hate that. Try again. Mm-hmm. Or I like this, but not all the way. What can I do? I just try to just free associate until some ideas come loose. I'll go for long walks. I will read books. I call it filling the tank. Sometimes you have to read books or watch movies or TV shows. And sometimes they don't have anything to do with what I'm writing, but watching will just shake something loose. Go to writing conventions, listen to podcasts, panels, read books to kids, just stay in the discipline, the reading, the writing, the storytelling, and try to fill that tank back up, try to fill it with some new ideas. Write fan fiction, write. This is what I'll do when I don't have a project and I need to keep the juices flowing. I will write parodies of songs. I will write Weird Al-esque parodies of songs. My favorite one that I wrote was a parody of You'll Be Back from Hamilton, but it's I Came Back, and it's about Palpatine, Emperor Palpatine coming back in the sequel trilogy, and it was a team effort with my husband, and I am very proud of it. It's on my blog, by the way, so you can find that link through my website, or you can just search for me, you'll be able to find that. So that's what I'll do. And what if it's really not coming? The ideas just aren't coming and they're not gelling. One thing that I'll do, and this works most of the time, is I will go back, look at my story, and try to figure out what I'm assuming that I don't need to assume. I had one story where I was working on it. I was trying to figure out who the bad guy would be. And I was just fighting with it. Nothing seemed to really work. And then I went back and I was like, okay, this bad guy has to do A, B, and C. This is what they're in the story to do. They need to do this to the characters. They need to push the plot forward in this way. And then I thought, no one said the character needed to be a boy, because I was thinking that the character needed to be a boy. No one said the character has to be a boy for this to happen. Flash of lightning. And suddenly the story started to come. I've been making an assumption about a character that I didn't need to make, had nothing to do with the story. And once I got past that, once I took the story back, took that character back to what they just needed to be for the story. And that can be broad strokes. It can be, I need a character who's going to challenge my hero. Or I need a character who's going to is going to find the dragon's egg and get us to the end of the story. Or I'm going to need a character who is good with puzzles. But beyond that, I don't know who this character is. Sometimes it's okay to just let myself find out. It's okay to strip back all those assumptions and try again. So when I hit really bad writer's block, I'll go for a walk. I'll turn on some music that enhances, doesn't distract what I'm thinking of. Just let myself reassociate and think, what assumptions am I making about this character that I don't need to make? Or what assumptions am I making about this story, this plot, that aren't correct? And once I do that, the ideas start to flow. It's like I've been hitting my head against a brick wall while there's been a gate right next to me the whole time. So I just step back, look at it again, find the gate, and walk on through. So that helps. But I'd say the biggest thing I'd say to writers is to be kind with yourself during the writer's block. There are a lot of reasons for it. Sometimes just forcing the issue will not work. But reading, taking some time for yourself, listening to music, doing self-care, even stepping back from the project and going to a different project for a little while, trying something new, or trying some writing exercises that you've never tried before, those can all help. Mm-hmm. But writer's block happens to everyone. It doesn't mean you're a bad writer. It doesn't mean that you don't have a good story. It just means you need to take the time to puzzle it out or let it work itself out one way or another.
Mm-hmm. That's a great answer. Usually, let's see, I made like I said, I am a writer. I'm not published, but I made a podcast episode. I think it was the second or third one about what I do when I have writer's block. And I'm no, just keep going, work through it. But this one sounds a lot more healthy. Your version sounds a lot better.
Sometimes you just work, like I said, sometimes with the procrastination issue, I do just have to work through it. And sometimes the issue is I need to sit down and just start writing down as many ideas as I can. That's another way of working through it. But sometimes the issue is, you know what? I'm burnt out. I'm exhausted. I need to take a step back. Once I get my energy back, the ideas will come. And they do. Eventually, they always do.
That's great. Okay. So one last question before we finish up. What
Sure.
are your thoughts about NaNoWriMo? Do you take part in NaNoWriMo, or do you stick to your own schedule?
I I love NaNoWriMo. I credit a lot to NaNoWriMo. When I was in high school, one of my friends challenged me to do NaNoWriMo, and I wrote a terrible book. It was so bad. I look back on it and shudder. It was so bad, but it was a complete 50,000 word book. It was the first time I'd ever finished a novel. And so I learned a lot about pacing. By the way, no one is ever going to see this book. It's never going to see the light of day. It's dead. I deleted it. It's gone. It was that bad. There was nothing salvageable about it. Um, so, but it taught me a lot. It was an apprenticeship book. It taught me a lot. So and having that challenge, I rise well to challenges like that. So having that kind of challenge was wonderful for me. I've never done it formally. I've never taken part in a group where they had prizes for finishing or contests for the submitted thing. I do it more as a personal thing. Like I said, I'm a long distance runner, so I do the marathon just for the sheer love of doing it, not for the medal at the end. Those are awesome. Those are nice. The accolades are nice. Um, and it's the same with me with NaNoWriMo. I do it as a challenge. I've also found it, especially for a middle grade book, because 50,000 words is a decent length for a middle grade book. It's even on the long end for a middle grade book. It's a good way for me to generate a book, to generate a story. So I'll use NaNoWriMo to generate a new book, just to hash out a new draft. I'll also use it just outside of November. I'll just take the NaNoWriMo schedule and try to hash out a draft anytime during the year. So I'll use that. Then it's nice. All the support is nice. It's really helpful for somebody trying to write a draft quickly. And my style of writing, I'll write a first draft quick and ugly. They're ugly, ugly books. But then they're done and I can sit there and revise it and I have something on the page I can work with. So Nano works out really well for me with that. It's not for everybody, but for those who are looking for a little bit of a challenge writing or something to just give them a push, or even a community that they can be held accountable to, it can be really useful. And I like all the aids and the schedules that come along with it because you can use those anytime during the year. I've also used NaNoWriMo as a revision period. So I'll cut my book into 30 pieces and say, okay, I've got about 30 chapters. So today we're going to revise this chapter. Tomorrow we're going to revise these 2 chapters because they're short, or we're going to work on these ones. And by the end of this month, I'm going to have a revised book. So if somebody's in a different stage of writing where they have a draft, but they need to sit down and use the time to revise, you can use Nano for that too. Maybe not formally, maybe not with a group, but the structure, the challenge does help, at least for me.
Okay, I do have another question. I'm sorry.
Yes, that's fine. Good time.
How do you find a group? How do you find a writing group?
You find a writing. Well, writing conferences. That's how I found my latest one. I made friends with another writer at this writing conference. It's Life, the Universe, and Everything in Provo. That's the Life, the Universe, and Everything Symposium. It's where I made friends with the guys in my writing group now. So finding like-minded writers at places like this, so other aspiring writers and maybe established writers who are looking for other members of their group be there. I know at LTW they have writing group meetings where everybody who writes middle grade could go into a room and talk to each other and maybe find a group there, find people. There are writing groups online. Like you can find, if you searched on Facebook groups, you look at the groups on Facebook or pretty much Facebook is from what I understand, maybe even Instagram, but mostly Facebook. They can find groups set up for locations. So you might find, writers group, Springville, Utah, which is my area, and you may be able to find that. Libraries might have meetings where people who are writing or working on something can go. Book clubs are actually a good place to go as well because you all like to read. Some of you might like to write. Those are good places.
Awesome.
if you're looking for a writing group, I would recommend looking on Facebook groups, see if there's anybody in your area. Writing conferences are a fantastic place to go. Used to be called Twitter. I guess it's X now. You can go on there. You might not find people in your immediate location, but depending on the hashtags you search, you could find people who are writing the same thing that you're writing, reading the same things you're reading, and they can find a group that way.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Allison. This has been a lot of fun. Where can our listeners find you? What's your website? Are you on Instagram?
Okay. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is just Allison Hymas. So at Allison Hymas. I'm not on X or Twitter anymore. It wasn't useful for me. I had to scale back. I'm on Facebook. Again, Allison Hymas, Allison K. Hymas. My website is AllisonKHymas.com. If you straight up Google me, you'll probably find that right up at the top. And my blog with my wonderful parody that I'm so proud of, that hasn't been added to in many a month, that is thestoryfanatic.blogspot.com.
Okay.
So
thank you so much. This was great.
All right, thank you.
Well, we'll see you later.
Bye-bye.